Hi, and welcome to another episode of InstaVision. I'm Glenn Reynolds, and this is a special Republican primary episode of InstaVision. I'm joined by former Governor Gary Johnson. He went to college, started a multi-million-dollar construction company, served 2 terms as governor of New Mexico before he was term limited out, where he vetoed more bills than just about any governor in American history. Now he's running for president as a libertarian-leaning Republican. You can see his website at GaryJohnson2012.com. And we've got him via Skype from a motel room somewhere in Lanconia, New Hampshire. Welcome, Governor. So now that you're on the campaign trail, you're actually biking through New Hampshire. Is that right? You're in Lanconia, New Hampshire, I think, now in a motel room we're talking to you.
Right. So 475 miles, 6-day ride. I'm riding it with my fiance Kate and my son Eric and New Hampshireites that join in the ride. But Glenn, if you want to call it a circus act, it's a circus act to try and gain attention to my campaign and, direct people to GaryJohnson2012.com.
Okay,
there we go.
So why are you running for president?
Well, I think I could do a good job. I think I'm the guy. It's a lousy job. President is a lousy job. I just wish somebody would do it. Somebody needs to do it.
Yeah, that's right. You know, it is a lousy job, but someone's got to do it. And the people who want it too much are probably the people you want in it the least.
Well, like I say, it's a lousy job. Somebody needs to do it. It's not being done.
So are we going through a libertarian moment in the GOP? We've got you, we've got Ron Paul. There seems to be a lot more small government sentiment than in recent years. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I think that it's what needs to happen in this country. You know, the whole notion of classical liberal, the whole notion of less government is better government. The whole notion that the best thing government can do for you and I is to empower you and I to make decisions that only you and I should be making.
So do you think your opposition to the drug war, which I share, by the way, is less of an obstacle than it would have been, say, 20 years ago to a candidate in the Republican primaries?
Well, I was at an event in Denver celebrating the fact that 5 years ago, Denver decriminalized all marijuana use. And being introduced at that, I was introduced as, here's the good news. Gary Johnson was the highest profile governor to talk against the drug war in 1999. That's the good news. The bad news is Governor Johnson is still the highest ranking official to ever talk against the drug war. But I do think that the American public has moved in that direction. 46% of Americans right now support legalizing marijuana. Really, the issue is just a couple of years away from being at a tipping point. We can't continue to arrest 1.8 million people a year on drug-related crime. And we now have 2.3 million people behind bars. The largest category of individuals behind bars are there because of really selling drugs, selling small amounts of drugs.
Yeah, that's, I think, one of the things that when people look back on this era in our history 50 or 100 years from now is going to be viewed as sort of one of the more shameful issues of the present. But the drug war seems to sort of have lost its resonance in the face of economic catastrophe.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's really terrific right now that PBS is running the Ken Burns special on prohibition. I think we got millions of people tuned into that here earlier in the week, and we need to make the correlation between alcohol and drugs, that it's similar, that the problems, 90% of the drug problem is prohibition related, not use related. That's not to discount the problems with use and abuse, but that ought to be the focus. Border violence right now with Mexico. 28,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. Come on. If we can't connect the dots between prohibition and violence, I don't know if we ever will be able to. These are disputes being played out with guns rather than the courts. And, back to the prohibition special. Look, who got rich during prohibition? Well, the mob did. What gained prominence What group gained prominence as a result of the prohibition of alcohol? Well, the mob did. And violence reigned supreme.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny, ending the drug war is sometimes seen as a liberal view, but we've got our most liberal president now, Barack Obama, and as Reason magazine just pointed out, he's just another drug warrior. I mean, people, I think, on the left had high hopes for him doing something about the drug war before he was elected, but once he's in, it's been business as usual and even a doubling down.
Well, and Glenn, you pointed at something earlier, which I think really resonates right now with conservatives, and that's just the costs involved in the drug war. Half law enforcement, half the courts, and half the prisons, half the costs related in all those areas is drug related. And to what end? Well, we're arresting 1.8 million people. We got 2.3 million people behind bars. And the notion of legalizing it, taxing it, raising the revenues from taxation, and then doing away with the costs currently involved. I'm advocating the legalization of marijuana. I think that by legalizing marijuana, I think we take giant strides toward rational drug policy regarding the other drugs. And that really starts with looking at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. Right now, with the fiscal issues we face, and by the way, I am the only candidate running for president promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm the only presidential candidate right now promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I'm also promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax, which in my opinion really reboots the American economy. It throws out all existing federal tax, replaces it with a consumption tax, which by all free market economists' reckoning does do just that. It reboots the American economy. It does away with income tax, does away with the IRS, does away with business tax, does away with the corporate tax. So when it comes to jobs, if the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs in this country as a result of a zero corporate tax rate environment, I don't know what will.
Well, I have to say, that all sounds just terrific to me. You've sort of had a little trouble getting attention. They finally let you into the debates, and I couldn't quite see why they were keeping you out when they were letting in people who were polling less than you. But you really sort of had the line of the night there when you said that your dog had created more shovel-ready jobs than Barack Obama. That does seem to about sum it up. What else would you do to fix the economy?
Well, I do think that we need to stop spending. I think we're on the verge of a monetary collapse unless we balance the federal budget. So I am promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress. I am promising to veto legislation where expenditures exceed revenue. I am promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax. You combine those three things, and I think you really set the stage for real economic growth and submitting a balanced budget to Congress. You could argue, well, Congress will override that veto, and that probably will be the case. But I suggest to you that under that scenario, spending will be less than if you're going to elect a president promising to do that over a 15 or 20-year period, or not promising to do anything about it at all, just saying that they're going to address it. Well, to me, that's what we've been doing, and that means nothing's going to happen. Back to monetary collapse. What's a monetary collapse in this country? Well, that's Russia. That's what happened in Russia. That's what happens when tomorrow you wake up and the dollars that you have in the bank aren't worth a thing. That's the Weimar Republic in the mid-20s, where 120,000 Weinmarks in the mid-20s bought a bungalow in Berlin, and a year later bought a loaf of bread. That's a monetary collapse, and that's not pretty, and we're not immune to that happening here.
I think you're right, and I think people don't take that threat seriously enough. And I very much hope that they're right and I'm wrong, but I'm afraid that you're right and they're wrong. So
I'm afraid too there's not going to be any leeway when it comes to dealing with this, that this is not going to be a predictable item. And on the plus side, look, we can balance the federal budget. We went to the moon. We are a people that can do this. We are a people that can live within our means. We have to do that in our own personal lives. There's no reason why the government can't do this starting right now. And that starts with electing a president who's going to, in this case, I'm laying out a scenario where spending will be less if you're going to elect a president that's going to promise to submit a balanced budget to Congress and promise to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. Congress can override, but you know what? Spending will be less under that scenario than any other scenario that you could present.
Well, I think you're right, and thank you for taking the time to talk with us tonight.
Glenn, it is great talking with you, and it's kind of cool being on the whole Skype thing. I hope it worked out on your end. It's sure working out here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's the miracle of the 21st century. Thanks a lot.
We'll look back on this a couple of years from now and we'll go, oh, wow, do you believe how primitive it was back when in the early Skype days?
I'm sure that's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can find out more about Governor Johnson's campaign by visiting his website, GaryJohnson2012.com. He's also got one at OurAmericanInitiative.com. And you can see him on Facebook at facebook.com/GovGaryJohnson. So great to have him here via the miracle of the internet, and it's great to have you here via the miracle of the internet too. We'll be back next week. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.